What's up, everyone? And I know that you're all studying for the FAA Part 107 exam. And in this video, I'm going to give you 50 flashcard style questions with the answers. And I promise you, these challenging questions will throw you for a loop. And they are the toughest, the grimiest, the sleaziest, the trickiest FAA style questions ever. The ultimate test prep for 2025. All eyes on me. Get ready. Let's go. Flashcard number 1, we just jumped right in. Under what conditions must you report an accident caused by your drone to the FAA, and within how many days must it be reported? Is it A, when there is $500 of property damage, report within 10 days? B, when there is serious injury requiring hospitalization or property damage over $500 within 10 days? Or C, if there is any physical injury or serious damage within 10 days? Now, some of you are saying that all of these answers basically say the same thing, but they don't, because there are two words that differentiate the correct answer from all of the rest, and they are hospitalization and over $500. The FAA will try to trick you by only saying $500 or physical injury, so unless you see those two words, don't fall for it. Next question. Which of the following statements is true regarding FAA recognized identification areas, or FRIAs? A, designated zones where drones must have remote ID broadcast modules. B, allows drones without remote ID to fly legally, but only under FAA supervision. C, areas where drones without remote ID can operate and be flown within VLOS. Now, this is another trick question, because if you look at B and C, you're going to notice that they both basically say the same thing, right? You can fly without remote ID. The only answer here that does not apply is A, because it says designated zones where drones must have remote ID modules. So both B and C seem to be correct, right? But look towards the end of answer B. It says, but only under FAA supervision. Listen, the FAA is not going to supervise a FRIA because they don't work for free. And not only that, but the FAA expects the FRIA sponsor to oversee the area's use according to their safety guidelines and the club rules. The community-based organization that applied for the FRIA in the first place is the one that's going to be supervising, not the FAA. You see how that was a trick question? That's why you're watching this video, because I have 48 more coming your way. And if you've already noticed, I'm putting a little orange check mark next to the correct answer at the end of each flashcard. Let's move to the next one. Under 14 CFR Part 107, which operation is explicitly prohibited? A, remote PIC is driving a moving vehicle while operating an SUAS in a sparsely populated area. B, remote PIC is a passenger on an aircraft in flight while operating a drone. C, remote PIC is a passenger on a moving boat while operating an SUAS in an unpopulated area. Now, I want you to stop, take a breath just for a minute, and understand something. All of the answers that are being provided have something in common, and that is that they're exciting, they're epic, they're emotional, all E words. And anytime you have an emotional reaction to anything, you cannot attach logic to it. The epicness of the answers is a trick to move you away from the question, and the question is logically implied, explicitly prohibited. So you know without any emotional attachment that you can't fly a drone while you're sitting in an airplane in flight under FAA rules and regulations. Next question. Which of the following drones needs to be registered under FAA Part 107 rules and regulations? A, a drone weighing 55 pounds and being flown commercially. B, a drone weighing 0.55 pounds and being flown recreationally. Or C, a drone weighing 250 grams and being flown recreationally. Now look closely. What do you see here? Do you see something that's trying to confuse you? If you know that this is meant to confuse you, then don't look at it. Look away and just think about which drones need to be registered under Part 107. And now you can think about this with certainty. Any drone that is less than 55 pounds and any drone that is more than 0.55 pounds. And if they are referring to gram weight, well, 250 grams is the threshold for the FAA requirement where you must register a drone at 250 grams. Whether you're flying it recreationally or you're flying it commercially does not matter. 250 grams, it must be registered. Number 5, refer to figure 69 of your Airman Knowledge Testing Supplement. You are inspecting a lighted tower approximately 8 nautical miles southwest of Corpus Christi International Airport, CRP. What is the lowest cloud ceiling that would permit you to safely inspect the top of this tower? Is it A, 1,104 feet MSL, B, 1,604 feet MSL, or C, 1,054 feet MSL? And for those of you who do not have the testing supplement, notice that I am now displaying on screen the sectional chart for figure 69 at your convenience. Now, if I go back to the answers, let me ask you, do you notice something? I do, immediately. 2 of those numbers, both A and C, are exactly the same numbers on that tower that you were looking at on the sectional chart. The only questionable concern here is which number will I choose for my referencing? And that question can only be answered by whether or not you see AGL or MSL in your answers. And clearly, we're only dealing with MSL referencing. Look at the lighted tower. The top number is MSL, and the one in parentheses will always be in AGL. Remember that. So the only thing that I need to do in regard to the question is understand that I have to stay 500 feet below clouds. So I just simply take the 1,104 feet and add 500 feet to it, and that will give me my answer at 1,604 feet MSL. And do you see how these tricky questions can just make you want to jump off of that lighted tower? Next question. What is the primary purpose of the rudder on an aircraft? And I know that a lot of you just went numb on this question. Is it A, to control the aircraft's pitch attitude, B, to control the aircraft's roll movement, or C, to control the aircraft's yaw movement? Now, as simple as this question is, more than likely you'll be answering this question incorrectly on the exam. And instead of me just giving you the answer, I'm going to give you some information that will allow you to answer the question correctly. You see, every winged aircraft has what's called control surfaces, and there are primarily 3 on an airplane: the ailerons, the elevator, and the rudder. And all of these control surfaces manipulate the movement of the aircraft. The ailerons on both of the main wings can be independent and move separately, either up or down. The elevator on the tail wing will usually move together as a single control surface, and the rudder, as you see on the diagram colored in green, is a single control surface that also manipulates the movement of the aircraft. And all of these control surfaces are connected to access lines which lead to one single point, and that is the center of gravity on the aircraft. So you can see that the information that I just provided you allows you to understand which one of these answers would be the most reasonable. And I explained all of this in detail on my other video, but here's the correct answer. Flashcard number 7. During UAS operations, you determine that the density altitude at your site is much higher than normal due to hot temperatures and low pressure. How will this affect the performance of your drone? A. It will improve performance because the air is less dense, reducing drag. B. It will decrease performance because the rotors and propellers are less efficient in thin air. Or C. It will have no significant effect because drones don't rely on aerodynamic lift. This can be a difficult question for most of you, but remember, we're referring to density altitude and not air density. Number 8, you're reading a METAR that states the following information that's being displayed, and based on this report, what is the lowest cloud layer and visibility you can expect at Corpus Christi? Now, I know you're scratching your head right now, right? But I told you this was not going to be easy. Look at the report and you can see the information is right in front of you. KCRP is the ICAO station identifier for Corpus Christi. The next coded group is the date and time observation, UTC Zulu. And if you continue to break down and interpret the codes, eventually you're going to find the visibility, and you will also find the altitude of the lowest cloud layer. Now, do you see how the gravy in your brain starts simmering when I explain the question and break it down? There is 3 statute miles of visibility, and broken clouds are at 700 feet. So A is the only answer that will apply. Now let's move on to flashcard number 9. You plan to operate an unmanned aircraft that weighs exactly 55 pounds on takeoff, including payload. Select a condition where you can legally operate this UAS under Part 107. See, I told you this one would be easy, right? Just kidding. A, you may operate under Part 107 if you obtain a waiver. B, you cannot operate under Part 107. You need a special airworthiness certificate or a Section 44807 exemption to operate legally. Or C, you can operate under Part 107 because the SUAS weight is 55 pounds and meets all FAA requirements. Now stop just for a minute. How do you feel? Overwhelmed, right? And that's because the answer has so much in it that you don't even remember what the question is anymore. I'm not just here trying to teach you the topics, I'm also trying to teach you the tactics. This is grimy, TMI, there's too much information here. So what you have to do is to break things down. And that means you have to cut the visceral fat out of the question and the answers. The only words that are important in the question is exactly 55 pounds and under Part 107, and the answers, the only thing that you're looking for is whether or not you can operate that drone under Part 107, and clearly it's a 55-pound drone. You have to be less than 55 pounds to be under Part 107. Next question, regarding Class D airspace. Unless otherwise depicted on the sectional chart, what are the standard vertical and lateral dimensions of Class D airspace surrounding an airport with an operational control tower? Now listen to me very carefully. Whatever the elevation of that airport is in MSL is where the surface begins. So if the airport elevation is already at 500 feet MSL, then the standard vertical dimension of Class D airspace vertically will begin from the surface of where the elevation begins. Let's take a look at the answers. A, surface up to 2,500 feet above airport elevation extending 4 nautical miles from the airport. B, surface up to 3,000 feet above airport elevation extending 5 nautical miles from the airport. C, 500 feet above airport elevation up to 3,500 feet extending 10 nautical miles from the airport. Choose your correct answer. Now here's another YouTube content creator with a question, but this time they did not know the answer. But guess what? I think I know the answer. Question, which type of clouds are specifically identified by name in a TAF forecast? Now I don't remember seeing any question like this on any study guide, do you? But here's the sneaky part. The FAA put this question on a Part 107 exam. And now you know why everyone is telling you that they've never seen that question before. There's something that I call the FAA assume rule, that they think that if you see the information on a TAF report, for example, that you should automatically know what that means. So let's pull up a TAF report so that way I can break this down so you'll be able to answer that question correctly on the Part 107 exam. Turn to figure 15 in your Airman Knowledge Testing Supplement. This is a terminal aerodrome forecast. You can see KMEM, which stands for Memphis International Airport, and just below that KOKC, which stands for Will Rogers World Airport, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Both of these forecasts have something coded in them that you've probably never seen before, and I'm going to show you what it is. Now, before I reveal the multiple choice answers, let's break down the question first. You see, here is the typical FAA assume rule. They think that you will know what types of clouds mean, which a type is completely different from cloud coverage. Coverage refers to clear skies, few clouds, scattered clouds, broken clouds, overcast clouds. You've seen those coded abbreviations 100 times on METAR reports and TAF reports, but they don't have anything to do with type of clouds. Do you get me? So now if I reveal the answers to you, you can see that this has nothing to do with cloud coverage. This is about the type of cloud formations. And the only cloud formation or cloud type that is listed on a terminal aerodrome forecast is the one that I'm pointing to right now, that code. But wait a minute, it's not just the CB code that I was pointing to that's a cloud type. There's another cloud type, and that is TCU. So pay attention to those tricky, sleazy tactics the FAA will impose on you when you're taking the exam. There is a difference between cloud type and cloud coverage. And you see, the information that I just gave you points you to the correct answer. Next question. You plan to fly your SUAS under Part 107 within a faded magenta area on a sectional chart around a non-towered airport. You will operate at 200 feet AGL, but you have not obtained ATC authorization. Are you in compliance with Part 107? Answers are A, yes, because you're below 700 feet AGL and flying in Class G airspace. B, no, because you are inside of Class G airspace and need ATC authorization. Or C, no, a non-towered airport's airspace usually begins at the surface. Now, the key things to remember here is faded magenta area around a non-towered airport. Number 13, which of the following statements about aircraft control surfaces is correct? A, the ailerons control pitch by moving symmetrically. B, the rudder controls yaw around the vertical axis. Or C, the elevator controls roll by moving one side up and the other side down. This is one of those questions that you're going to know immediately because we just went over this. The examples that I'm giving you are similar to what you'll see on the exam when you have references to one question previously before. Then the next following questions that you're going to have may relate to the question that you could not answer, so it makes it much easier for you. And my advice is, if you are unsure about a question, then mark it so that way if you have a similar question later, you can always come back and correct the answer. Flashcard 14. A stall occurs when the smooth airflow over the wing of an airplane is disrupted and the lift degenerates rapidly. This is caused when the wing A, exceeds the maximum allowable altitude. B, exceeds the required weight limit of the aircraft. Or C, exceeds the critical angle of attack. Now, if you did not study this or you have absolutely no idea of what the question's asking, there is a way that you'll be able to deduce the correct answer simply by breaking down the question. The question is pointing towards the wing of the aircraft. So I know you've all flown on a plane before. You've all sat in a seat that was by the window closest to the wing of the aircraft. What was the wing doing as you were looking out and the plane was either taking off or landing? The angle of the wing was changing as it was being manipulated by the control surfaces or the flaps. And that change will also change the direction of the air that's flowing around the wing. And that air is what causes the plane to have lift or drag. But if you exceed that angle, or if you have too much of an angle, the air will become turbulent and will no longer be flowing on the surface of the wing, therefore causing the aircraft to stall. And that little airplane explanation is why I know you will not have a problem with this question on the Part 107 exam. And remember, you can always pause the video if you need more time to think about your answers. 15. A California state agency plans to fly a 20-pound drone for official wildlife research. It's a good thing I didn't say that one too fast. Must the operation comply with Part 107? A, yes, because all drone flights must follow Part 107. B, no, the agency can operate under a public COA issued by the FAA. Or C, yes, unless the drone is under 55 pounds. Now, let me give you the psychology behind this question and answer. You see, the question is pretty straightforward. Anyone can understand what the question is asking, but the difficulty here is trying to understand the answers. You see, whenever it is you're trying to understand something, particularly when you're trying to make a decision or choose, your brain will automatically throw out what it is that is difficult to understand. So I know all of you are already throwing out the one that says public COA issued by the FAA because nobody knows what that is. But if I explained what that was, then maybe you'll have an opportunity to put it back into the equation. And you're going to need to put it back into the equation because according to subpart A, Part 107.1, it specifically states that Part 107 only applies to the operation of small civil unmanned aircraft systems. There's nothing in that subpart that says anything about official wildlife research. And if you look at the answers again, both A and C, which have the word yes in it, do not apply to the question because wildlife research is not a part of Part 107. So aren't you glad that you reconsidered the answer that was the most difficult? And later in the video, I will explain what a public COA actually is. Next question. Which of the following best describes a requirement for Category 1 SUAS operations over people? Now, while you're looking at the answers and trying to figure this out, I want to explain something to you. The FAA is really pushing this Category 1, Category 2, Category 3, 3, Category 4 on the Part 107 exams. So it's important that you really do research and understand about this particular section. Now, when you go to the FAA website and read the information in regard to flying over people, they don't mention anything about grams. The only thing that they mention is about weight in pounds, 0.55 pounds. And the reason I'm mentioning this to you is because if you happen to see something that says 250 grams on the Part 107 exam in regard to flying over people, more than likely it's going to be incorrect. It's a trick question because 250 grams does not equal 0.55 pounds. Get that in your head right now. 0.55 pounds does not equal 250 grams. And there's so many people who are confused about that, including ChatGPT. Look, I just put in a request to ask ChatGPT to tell me about Category 1 FAA rules and regulations, and guess what? It says that 250 grams equals 0.55 pounds. Can you believe that? And then you can see at the bottom, I'm asking it to confirm whether or not 250 grams equals 0.55 pounds. And guess what? It reconfirmed the wrong information again. So if ChatGPT is confused about the weight, 0.55 pounds, then more than likely you're going to be confused also. Category 1 does not mention anything about gram weight. The only time you'll see grams is when you're registering your drone. And it's pretty obvious now that A is the correct answer. But you know what I did for you? I put everything very concisely in answer A, so that way it's sort of like a cheat sheet and you'll know exactly what's required in Category 1. Let's continue with the same question, but this time for Category 2. What is required for flying over people in Category 2? Well, you see, I've put together another cheat sheet, so that's giving you a clue. The drone must be over 0.55 pounds. Notice they're not mentioning grams. Category 2 is specific about no greater than 11 foot-pounds of kinetic energy on impact. 11 foot-pounds is what Category 2 refers to. You must have an FAA-accepted means of compliance and a declaration of compliance, and remote ID is required. You already know the answer to this one. Answer B. The next flashcard is pertaining to the next category. Which of the following best describes the requirement for Category 3 SUAS operations over people? You can already see I made another cheat sheet there, and the only difference from Category 2 to Category 3 is 25 pounds of kinetic energy on impact. That is the only thing that changes. So take a little photo of this cheat sheet that I made you for all of these categories. It'll make it a lot easier for you to remember. Now, flashcard 19 pertains to Category 4 requirements. What you're looking for here is very, very obvious, and it is called an airworthiness certificate. If you see that anywhere on a Part 107 exam, that only applies to Category 4. So where you were seeing the declaration of compliance and the means of compliance in Categories 2 and 3, which basically come from the manufacturer, you don't need to have those sort of certifications for Category 4. The airworthiness certificate takes place of the MOC and the DOC. And despite the fact that Category 4 is under Part 107.140, the airworthiness certificate is issued under 14 CFR Part 21. So the correct answer here is A. I've just given you 4 answers on these flashcards. But if you have any questions, go ahead, send me a comment and I'll break it down for you. Flashcard number 20. Drone operations being conducted at night are specified under 14 CFR 107.29. What is required under the rules and regulations? This is one of those questions that you really wouldn't know about it unless you studied it or you came across it somehow. What this is all about is that the new exams after 2021, they have the night operations built into those exams. So if you're worried about flying your drone at night, don't be, because it's perfectly legal. You just have to fulfill certain requirements. And you see the multiple choice answers below. Which one do you think would be appropriate? Well, let me show you what is written under the Code of Federal Regulations. Part 107.29, Operation at Night. And read this when you have time, but I'm pointing to 3 crucial things that are required if you want to fly your drone at night. The first one is that the remote pilot must be certified. The second one is that you must have anti-collision lights. And the third one is that those lights are visible for 3 statute miles. But what is so disconcerting is that there is a 4th piece of the puzzle here that is required, and no one talks about it. You won't find it on any other study guides, and that is that the anti-collision lights must must have a flash rate sufficient to avoid collision. Now be honest with yourself. If I didn't just mention that, would you know that when it was time to take the Part 107 exam? Well, I'm telling it to you right now. Anti-collision lights must have a flash rate. Look for that on the exam. And you can see that the only answer that has all 4 of those requirements is C. And I bet some of you are so happy that I went over that question. Number 21, you plan a commercial drone flight near a stadium on game day. A temporary flight restriction has been issued for the event. What must you do before operating your SUAS in the TFR area? Now, if you don't know what a TFR is, or it simply has not been explained to you, then there's no way you're going to be able to answer this question. You're simply going to have to guess. So instead of doing that, why don't I just explain it to you? If there's a special event, a Super Bowl, or a presidential visit, the Secret Service will request a TFR for safety and security, and the FAA will issue a TFR, and nothing, no drone, no helicopter, no airplane is allowed to fly in that area. Nothing can fly there. Well, unless you're a pigeon. Honestly, I'd want to stay clear from that area even if I was a bird. You can get into some serious trouble if you're flying in an area that has a temporary flight restriction. The only way you can fly there is if you obtain permission from the issuing authority. And when I say issuing authority, who am I referring to? The president? Secret Service? No, I'm referring to the FAA. They're the ones that issued the TFR. And not only that, but they published it in the NOTAMs. And the reason they published the TFR on their online NOTAMs portal is so that way they can communicate with pilots, because that's the way pilots find out what's going on in regard to temporary flight restrictions. So you see how I'm breaking all of this down on this little flashcard for you, so that way you know exactly how to choose the appropriate answer. And the only answer here is B, because that is the only one that applies. Now we're going to throw up a few flashcards that have to do with airport signs and markers. See how well you do. What does the solid double yellow lines with double yellow dashed lines at an airport indicate? Refer to figure 65 item G. Now, just so you know, the testing supplement is only a supplement. It's not a study guide. So it's important that you're learning the information and not solely relying on the supplement for your preparations. Now, in regard to this marking, it could be answer A, taxiway limit, taxiway ending marker. B, aircraft entry is prohibited, no entry marker. Or C, boundary safety zone, runway hold short marker. Now be honest with me and be honest with yourself. Do you know this answer? Because if you do, that means that someone either told you, or you studied it, or you've been on a taxiway at an airport before. This is a very important marker, and let me tell you why. The FAA and the NTSB both say that 70% of the runway incursions are caused by this marker. And to give you the definition of an incursion, any unauthorized presence, an aircraft, a person, a vehicle that is on a runway when they should not be there, is a possible hazard. It's a safety violation. And by saying this, you already know that this marker is important, and the FAA knows it too, and that's why they put it on the exam. When you're taxiing your airplane and you roll up to this marker, you can't cross over it. It's got 2 double yellow lines and 2 double dash lines. Would you cross over that line if it was on a freeway? This is a hold short marker, and you'll find these on the taxiways. You will not find these on runways. When you taxi up to that, you need to stop, hold short of that marker until you get ATC clearance for you to be able to cross over that. So you already know the correct answer on this one, right? Let's move to a few more. Stay on figure 65 and look to the top for item A. What does this red sign with white numbers indicate? So I love the way I phrased this question, because I mentioned red and I mentioned numbers. You see, the color red is significant for something. Whenever you see the color red, you're driving in a car and you see a sign or a light that has something that is red. What does that mean? It means that you need to stop. And the colors that you're seeing on these airport signs, well, they didn't just flip a coin and say, hey, let's make it red. No, they chose that color for psychological and safety reasons. Get this, red is recognized internationally as a warning sign or a stop sign. So now that you know about this color, what are you going to do when you go on a blind date and you see that the person is wearing red shoes? So what about these 2 white numbers, 4 and 22? What do they mean? And that's a very simple explanation, because white gives you the highest contrast, so it's visible from the furthest distance. So enough with these colors. Let's talk about the numbers, 4 and 22. And both of those numbers represent runways. Runway number 4 is to the left, runway number 22 is to the right. And now that you have all the information, let's tie all of this together. This is a mandatory instruction sign. It's telling you, hold short, stop, don't go anywhere until you get clearance from ATC. And runway 4 is to the left, runway 22 is to the right. And don't forget that all runway numbers are magnetic headings by degrees. And you see I've just marked the correct answer, but what would happen if I decide to remove one of those numbers and you only have, for example, a number 22? What does that sign now become? Crickets. I hear crickets. It becomes exactly what it was in the beginning, a mandatory instruction sign, but this time there's only one runway, and that is runway number 22. You must hold short, stop, and wait for authorization from ATC before you proceed. And here's a quick follow-up flashcard for you. What are the primary colors of a mandatory instruction sign at an airport? Well, we already went over that, right? Red background with white letters. Flashcard 25. Let's get a little tricky on this one. Refer to figure 23. What is the maximum altitude you're permitted to fly when inspecting the high-intensity towers 6 miles southwest of Savannah Hilton Head Airport, SAV? Now, let me give you a little tip on this one. Before you actually go to the sectional chart, figure 23, look at the answers first. This is going to allow you to locate those towers because usually on the FAA exams, the numbers that you're seeing in the answers are similar or exactly the same as the numbers that are on the towers that they're asking you to look for. The most difficult challenge that you're going to have is when they're asking you to locate the towers 6 miles southwest, and there are a few towers around that area, so you don't really know which one to select. But the answers A, B, and C tell you which numbers that you need to look for. And you can see that 1,545 feet MSL was in one of the answers. And this is an emotional trick because you're so happy that you found something that matched that you automatically assume that you found the correct answer. But you need to remember what the question is asking you. It's asking you what is the maximum altitude that you're permitted to fly on that tower. And since you already know that that tower is 1,545 feet MSL, then to fly above that tower, you just need to add another 400 feet, which gives you 1,945 feet MSL. And that's because the FAA allows you to fly 400 feet above any structure, 400 feet, no more. So watch out for these tricky questions. Number 26, the recommended angle of entry and point of entry for a manned aircraft to enter an airport traffic pattern is A, 45 degrees to the base leg just below the traffic pattern. B, 45 degrees at the midpoint of the downwind leg at the traffic pattern altitude. Or C, 45 degrees at the upwind leg towards the traffic pattern. Now, if you don't know anything about airport traffic patterns, well, at least there's one thing that you do know. You know that it's 45 degrees because they gave you 45 degrees in all of the answers. So now the only thing you need to figure out is the point of entry. So let me show you a traffic pattern so you'll understand exactly what this looks like. Now pay attention to 3 things. This traffic pattern is always at a set altitude. That's number 1. Number 2, notice that all of the planes in this traffic pattern are making left turns. And that means that this is a left-hand traffic pattern. Number 3, notice that each turn is labeled as a leg. There's a base leg, there's a final approach leg, there's a departure leg, there's a crosswind leg, and there is a downwind leg, which is basically at the same direction that the wind is blowing. Now the question here is, how are these planes that are flying around in this left-hand traffic pattern getting in? How are they entering into this traffic pattern? Well, if you look to the very top at number 1, you'll see that the planes are entering at a 45-degree angle onto the downwind leg. And this answers the question. And the reason they're entering at a 45-degree angle, if you're asking, is because that is the safest point for a plane to enter into a traffic pattern. It allows the plane that's entering into the pattern to look out the left window to see if anything's coming. And it also allows the planes who are flying on the downwind leg to see if any plane is entering into the traffic pattern. So now that I have explained this to you with perfection, you know exactly what the answer is. So don't get this one wrong on the exam. It's very easy. 45 degrees, midpoint of the downwind leg. Flashcard 27. Which of the following statements about crew resource management in an SUAS operation is false? A. Individuals who exhibit signs of hazardous attitudes should be approached. B. Crew members should not under any circumstances challenge the decisions of the remote pilot in command. Or C. The remote PIC and all crew members should communicate concerns to each other. Now, I want you to remember this very profound thought. After you pass the Part 107 exam, you will be involved in operations where you are the remote pilot in command. And being the remote pilot in command means that you can't forget that you're also a human being. Sometimes what you think is correct and what you think you know has to do only with your ego. And when you're behaving in a manner where the decisions that you're making affects other people's safety, then they have a right to be able to correct you. They have a right to be able to challenge you. They have a right to be able to say you're doing it wrong. And you, as the remote pilot in command, have an obligation to listen to the concerns of your crew members or the people who are working with you and consider them appropriately. You know, one of the things that you'll have by staying tuned to this channel is not just a person who's going to teach you these topics. It's someone who's going to be able to transform you into a much better remote pilot. And this philosophy is what's going to allow you to take what it is that you've learned and apply it to the real world. So you already know what the correct answer is on this flashcard. Yes, crew members by all means have the right to challenge your decisions as you are the remote pilot in command. Next question. The numbers 9 and 27 on a red and white airport sign indicate that the runways are oriented approximately. Now, I just paused for a second because I wanted you to look at the answers and understand something right now, that you are going to have a 50-50% chance of getting this either right or wrong. And the reason for that is because I already know that most of you do not know what true or magnetic actually means. And not only that, but there's a sneaky little visual trick that's here also. Do you see it? Let me show you. Look at answer choice B, 90 degrees and 270 degrees true. It's the only one here that seems as though they wrote it correctly. And in this situation, seeing is not actually believing, because the one below it, answer C, is also correct. 90 degrees and 270 degrees magnetic. Now, here is the moment while you're taking the exam when you just freeze and you stop. And you say, I don't know which one to choose. And that's only because you don't know the difference between true and magnetic. So I'm challenging you now. What's the correct answer? You still don't know, because you have to understand that principle first before you can answer this question. So let me give you the breakdown. The most basic navigational tool for airplanes, boats, even if you're going on a camping trip, is a magnetic compass. And didn't that just make you remember this whole thing forever? Flash, there's only one correct answer, C, 90 degrees and 270 degrees magnetic. Don't forget it. Next one, an aircraft announces that they are on short final for runway 9er. Where is the aircraft in relation to the airport? Now, as difficult and as tricky as you think this question is, it's actually extremely simple. So go pull out a pencil and paper right now and do what I'm doing. Write down the degrees of a compass on a piece of paper and make sure that you're indicating north, south, east, and west. Remember the question. The aircraft announced short final, runway 9. What short final means is that the aircraft is on its final stages of landing on runway 9, very close to the airport. So if you know that runway 9 has a heading of 90 degrees, then just draw a runway that's pointing to 90 degrees. And the next thing you need to know is if an airplane announces that they're getting ready to land on runway 9, that's the direction that the airplane is going. And in this situation, they are just short of the airport. So let me draw the little airports here. I don't know if it's left-hand traffic pattern, right-hand traffic pattern, but it doesn't matter. The airplane is west of the airport and it's getting ready to land on runway 9. So let me ask you this question. Where is the aircraft in relation to the airport? Well, I think you already know that answer, right? And if you follow the example that I just gave you, you won't have any problem answering any question on the exam. Here's an easy question for you. Flashcard 30. Wind shear can exist A, at all altitudes, B, only at lower altitudes, C, only at higher altitudes. Now, I can choose to just give you the answer here, just like everyone else, and then move on to the next question. But don't you think it would be better if I explained what wind shear was, just in case on the Part 107 exam there happened to be a derivative of this question and you don't really know how to answer it because you never took the time to study about wind shear? Well, let me tell you what it is and give you a cool analogy. Wind shear is like walking up an escalator that's moving at a steady pace, and then all of a sudden someone reverses the escalator and cranks it to full turbo speed. and you didn't have any warning of that happening, and 1 second you're cruising along nice and steady, and the next minute you're falling over your face, tripping over everything, and flying over the escalator because somebody suddenly and unexpectedly changed the speed and direction of that escalator when it was moving nice and calm and you were just sitting there all relaxed and peaceful. That's wind shear. It can occur at any time, anywhere, any altitude, it does not matter. So wind shear can occur at all altitudes. The next one, a TAF report has winds at this code. What does this mean? Is it A, wind from 180 degrees true, 12 kilometers per hour? B, wind is from 180 degrees magnetic at 12 knots? Or C, wind is from 180 degrees true at 12 knots? Now, it's pretty obvious here that the numbers 180 degrees and the number 12 are both common numbers because they're in the question. But what's not in the question is whether or not this is true or magnetic, or whether we're talking about knots or kilometers. And I know some of you are saying, hey Mike, but you told us that magnetic was the universal navigator. Of course I did, but I was talking about things that were flying in the air or floating on the water. These reports, METARs, TAFs, are land-based reports. They have a little tower or some station or something that's permanently seated on the ground that's taking these reports and referencing these reports from the ground. So the takeaway here is that if these observations are being made from a fixed point at the surface, stationary, then the reference point also needs to be something that's fixed, stationary, and doesn't move, and that's when we refer to a true heading, which is the North Pole. Do you see how I maneuvered you to understand this? TAFs and METARs are taken from a fixed point, so therefore you have to have a reference that is a fixed point, and a true heading is the North Pole, which is a stationary place that does not change. Magnetic settings, on the other hand, do have variations. So now that I've explained all of this to you, do you know what the correct answer is here? Go ahead, write it down on a piece of paper right now, and I'll put the answer on the screen in just a second. You got it? That's it. Let's move to the next question. According to 14 CFR Part 48, when would a person not be permitted to register an SUAS? Is it A, if the owner does not possess a valid state-issued driver's license? B, when the owner is less than 13 years of age? Or C, when the owner is less than 16 years of age? Now, for this question, where everyone makes the mistake is thinking that a 13-year-old cannot register a drone. That is not true. A 13-year-old cannot take the Part 107 exam and become a certified remote pilot. But that $2,000 drone that they just got for a birthday present, yes, they can register that drone with the FAA. Flashcard 33. Refer to Figure 2. If an SUAS weighs 50 pounds, what approximate weight would the SUAS structure be required to support during a 45-degree bank turn while maintaining altitude? Now, let me say this to you. The reason why most will get this question wrong is for one reason and one reason only, and that's because you're trying to take a complex calculation and do it simply in your head. You have to understand that your brain tries to tune certain things out that it doesn't understand or it doesn't consider as being reasonable. So it's very important that you bring a calculator to the exam so you can answer this question correctly. So now let me show you the simple steps on how you should be doing this. You know the drone weighs 50 pounds, but it's going to feel like it weighs much more when it starts making a banked turn. And depending on the angle or the degree of the turn, that angle of bank, or in this case 45 degrees, is going to have a load factor value. And that value is what you're looking at next to 45 degrees that says 1.414. And all you need to do is to take that value and multiply it by 50 pounds and you will get your answer. And this question, the correct answer is C, 70 pounds. And do you see how easy that was? And the reason was because I had a calculator in my hand while I was speaking to you. So don't forget to bring a calculator when you have to take your exam, so that way you can answer this question correctly. Flashcard number 34. Refer to Figure 78. You have been hired to inspect the railroad tracks from Blenco to Onawa, southeast of Sioux City. You will be flying your SUAS to conduct the inspection. What authorization is required? Now open your supplement. If you don't have your supplement, you see I'm putting everything on screen. What you're looking for here are railroad tracks. Now, this is where everyone makes the mistakes. The lines of longitude with the tick marks are not railroad tracks. Get that in your head. Railroad tracks will usually be curving because of the terrain. So what you're looking for are the railroad tracks at Blanco, not the lines of longitude near Blanco. And the tracks that you need to inspect run from Blanco up to Onawa. And if you're having trouble finding it on the sectional chart, don't worry, I'm on top of it right now. Here's the part where you now start getting concerned about airspace classification. You see, there's Onawa Municipal Airport right there. I'm looking at it, K36. And there must be a class of airspace that's around it because I see a runway and there've got to be planes landing and taking off. So what actually is the airspace around Onawa Municipal Airport? Well, that's the question that you're going to be asking yourself on the exam, because that airport is adjacent to the tracks that you're going to be inspecting. So let me alleviate you from that concern. That airport does not have any classification of airspace around it. And just because you see a magenta colored airport doesn't necessarily mean that it's Class E or Class B or Class C. On a sectional chart, whenever you're in an area that has no designation of airspace classification, then it will automatically default to Class G airspace. And in this situation, you can only fly up to 400 feet, right? And if there was a Class E airspace around this, then it probably wouldn't begin at either 700 feet or 1,200 feet AGL anyway, right? The only reason why you would need to be worried about flying in this location is if you saw that that airport had a dashed magenta line around it where the airspace actually was from the surface up to 1,200 feet AGL. But other than that, looks like you're in the clear. Class G airspace, no authorization required. The correct answer is C. Flashcard 35 and still alive. Refer to Figure 59, Area 2. The chart shows gray lines with VR1667, VR1617, and VR1668. Could this area present a hazard to operation of a small UAS? Now, for this question, you will not need to go to the sectional chart, but let's pull it up anyway. The reason that I put this on a flashcard is because it opens an opportunity for the FAA to use their little trick tactics. You see, these are military training routes, and they will either be labeled as VR or IR, and they will either have 3 numbers or 4 numbers following. If it starts with a VR, that means that they're flying visual flight rules and they're not under ATC control. So think about this. If they're flying visual, doesn't that more than likely mean that they're flying closer to the ground? But what actually confirms that reasoning will be the amount of numbers that follow VR. So in this situation, you're looking at VR with 4 numbers after it. So I want to give you a really cool analogy so you'll keep this in your memory. If you see 3 numbers on a military training route, it's above 1,500 feet. Just think of the word sky that has 3 letters in it. If you see a military training route that has 4 numbers in it, just think of the word down, and that will tell you that it is below 1,500 feet. So these military training routes that you're looking at will fly below 1,500 feet AGL. And yes, this can be a hazard if you're conducting an operation with a drone, because you can fly up to 400 feet AGL, but the problem is they can fly below 400 feet AGL because this is a military training route that goes below 1,500 feet AGL. 36. Hazardous attitudes occur to every pilot to some degree. What are the 5 hazardous attitudes? A. Antisocial, impatient, machoism, reserved, insecurity. B. Anti-authority, impulsivity, macho, resignation, invulnerability. C. Angry, insensitive, malicious, rebellious, introverted. Now, I don't know about you, but if you didn't see this question before or you've never studied this question, then trying to answer this question correctly is going to be just like trying to win the Powerball and you never even bought a ticket. This is a question that more than likely is going to be on the Part 107 exam. The reason the FAA deems this as being important is because these 5 hazardous attitudes can affect a pilot's judgment and decision making. They are all psychological patterns that increase risk, and understanding them is critical for safe flight operations. And I know you're probably saying that all of these attitudes can be hazardous, but the only ones that are important are the ones that the FAA put on the Part 107 exam. And what they'll try to do is to trip you up so that way when you're looking at the answers, you become so confused that you don't even remember what the question was about anymore. The tip I can give you is to study these as if someone were to come up to you randomly. You could just rattle off these 5 hazardous attitudes without having to look at a piece of paper. And you can see that I already marked the correct answer. Let's move to the next flashcard. Now, it's amazing how these simple questions seem so difficult without an explanation, right? But but every single question counts on the exam, such as this one, 37. Every physical weather process is accompanied by or results from which one of the following? Now you can see all three answers here. I don't have to read them out, but doesn't it seem as though all three of these answer choices would apply? This is the oldest trick in the book. You want to know why? It's because the correct answer that you choose is also the one that causes the ones that you didn't choose. So here's a cool test-taking strategy. Look into the answers such as I do. A, does the movement of air cause pressure differential or heat exchange? Answer, no. B, does pressure differential cause movement of air or heat exchange? Answer, no. But C, does heat exchange cause a movement of air or a pressure differential? Answer, definitely yes. Do you see how I just flipped the script on the FAA trick question? Both answers A and B are secondary causes from heat exchange, and heat exchange is the root cause because of uneven heating from the earth causing temperature differences, and then temperature differences causes pressure differences, and then pressure differences causes the air to move, and the movement of air with warm air rising and cool air descending causing clouds and condensation, and the building of clouds causing storms. And all this time you're flying in your airplane and you feel nothing but turbulence, and all of this is a result from the root cause of heat exchange. Need I say more? Let's move to flashcard 38. Safety is an important element for a remote pilot to consider prior to operating an unmanned aircraft system. To prevent the final link in the accident chain, a remote pilot must consider which methodology? Is it A, crew resource management, B, safety management system, or C, risk management? Now, if you were to flip a coin right now, I bet you'd have a much better chance of getting that question correct than if you were trying to answer it yourself. So here's how I break down and differentiate for you. Crew resource management is about teamwork. It's about having a crew and improving communication. It's about leadership and workload management. CRM is all about the human side of safety. Safety Management System, SMS, is the organizational planning of safety procedures and policies. This is when you set up and organize a safety plan for your drone operation. And risk management is the final link, because this is when you're actually in the field operating. Your drone is in the air and you're assessing all of the possible or potential risks. You're mitigating any risks and you're trying to reduce risks as you operate. Do you see how I'm breaking this down? Risk management is the key to both SMS and CRM. It's the final link. But here's the thing. Risk management can also be done at any time, and that's the magic and the beauty of it. So the correct answer for this question is C, risk management. I promise you'll see this one on the exam. Take your notes. Let's move to the next flashcard. Number 39. What does the acronym ADM stand for? And on this question, I'm not going to answer this question until the end. I want you to go and find the answer and then confirm your answer at the end of this video. Flashcard number 40. While conducting a commercial drone flight, you notice that the battery on the drone is draining faster than usual due to colder than normal temperatures. What is the most appropriate action under good ADM principles? And you thought that I wasn't going to explain ADM on the last flashcard? Well, nope. ADM is the mental processing of a pilot. It's what a pilot will use consistently to make safe, sound decisions in flight. It's kind of like having your kids at the water park and you're actively involved in the process of having fun with them, but you're also making sure that they don't jump off the top of that tower. It's kind of like that. It's a mental process. And the goal of ADM is for you to identify hazardous situations so you can make very well-informed decisions on what actions you need to take appropriately. I don't think for all of the time that I was studying before to take this exam that I've ever heard anyone explain it that way. Now, you're going to have to dig deeper and study into ADM. The FAA has certain tools and models that you can use in regard to improving your ADM. As you can see, I'm displaying it on screen. I don't actually call them models. What I actually call them are checklists that the FAA will provide to you so that way you can have a better understanding about how to utilize ADM. So do your homework, and I promise you I will make another video and incorporate ADM in that video so I can give you a full detailed explanation. By now you probably already know what the acronym stands for, so let's go over the answers. If I leave out all of the usual fluff that they put into these questions, the drone's battery is draining faster than usual. What do we do? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. The correct answer is B. Land the drone immediately in a safe area, assess the situation, and postpone that mission if necessary. That is good ADM. So we're going to move to the next flashcard, number 41. Now, this question is kind of like a freebie. They give you this question because they want you to answer it correctly, not necessarily because they're trying to trick you. And you know how I know that? It's because they exaggerate the two wrong answers. The question is, when incorporating crew resource management CRM into an unmanned aircraft operation, where should CRM be integrated? This is like somebody trying to bake a cake and they're asking themselves, where should the eggs and the milk be incorporated? In the mix. Throw it all in there. All phases of the operation. All phases of the operation. Remember that for the Part 107 exam. This is a very common question. Flashcard 42. What approach should a remote pilot prioritize to avert the final stage of an accident sequence? Is it A, safety management system, B, risk management, or C, crew resource management? Now, do you remember those words, final stage? Is it all starting to come together now? Risk management is the correct answer, B. Flashcard number 43. Which classification of small unmanned aircraft requires an airworthiness certificate issued by the FAA? You see how this is all coming together now? There is only one category that requires an airworthiness certificate, and I know the answer, and you know now that you know the answer, but there are some who do not know the answer, such as whoever's publishing some of these amateur books. Be careful of the information that you receive, but as I mentioned, you already know what the answer is here. It is category 4. The answer is B. Flashcard 44. An increase in load factor will cause the aircraft to A, stall at a higher airspeed, B, cause the aircraft to spin, C, become difficult to control. Now, believe it or not, this is probably the most difficult concept to understand. It's a fundamental aerodynamic concept, and it's applied to both manned and unmanned aircrafts. And for this question, I don't mind giving you the answer now because you still would have a difficult time understanding it, even if I gave it to you gift wrapped as a Christmas present. You see, an increase in load factor will cause an aircraft to stall at a higher airspeed, and that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because if the plane is going faster, then why would it stall? But that's not what they mean. What this is about is when an aircraft is flying straight and level, then the conditions are considered as being normal. It's not turning, it's not banking, it's not climbing, it's not descending, and the wings have airflow that's flowing over it normally, so that way the aircraft can maintain lift. And at this normal condition, 1G of load factor, 1G of gravity is what they call it, when it's flying in what I call the normal condition, well, the plane has to be traveling at a certain speed in order to stay up in the air. You know what it's like when you're a passenger on a plane and you're sitting on the runway, the plane is not moving, and all of a sudden it starts rolling forward, it starts moving, it's getting faster and faster, and some way you know that once it picks up enough speed that the plane is all of a sudden going to start to lift off the ground. You know almost instinctively when that time is coming. And the pilots know very well, not only based on experience, but based on what the instruments are telling them, that they have acquired enough speed on that runway to now rotate that plane and get it off the ground. Now, once the plane is airborne, it now has to maintain that speed in order to maintain lift. But if the airspeed begins to decrease and they're not going as fast as they were when they took off, then the plane will start descending or it will stall. So let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that anything below 100 miles per hour, that means the plane will stall. So 100 miles per hour is the threshold. Now the pilot wants to show off a little bit. He or she wants to turn the aircraft or maneuver the aircraft on a banked angle. So the aircraft is now banking at 30 degrees. What do you think is happening to the aircraft right now? You know, it's starting to feel heavier. The load factor is increasing because it's on a 30-degree bank angle. And that additional stress, that additional load factor on the aircraft, because it's banking, is making the plane feel as if it wants to descend or stall. So what does the pilot need to do? The pilot needs to either increase speed of the aircraft to gain lift or to increase the angle of attack to gain lift. And if the pilot decides to increase the airspeed to 150 miles an hour, it may not be enough to prevent a stall. So the pilot increases the angle of attack slightly and increases the speed to 200 miles per hour. And now the plane can maintain altitude, the same altitude it was flying at, because it's traveling at 200 miles an hour, and if it goes below 200 miles an hour on that banked turn, it will stall. So the stall speed increased from 100 miles per hour to 200 miles per hour. Do you see how I explain that thing to you? As load factor increases when you're making a bank turn, for example, you need to have a higher airspeed in order to maintain altitude or the plane will stall. So now I'm going to flash the last 5 cards on screen so that way you can answer these questions by yourself. I'm going to go ahead and take a break, and I'll be back after these flashcards and we'll go over the answers at the end of the video. Alright everyone, thank you so much for keeping up with me on this video. I am talked out. The answers to the last 5 questions all were answer A, and the acronym ADM stands for Aeronautical Decision Making. I'll have more videos coming, doing my best to get you all the highest score possible. Stay tuned to this channel. Until then, I'll see you on the next video.